It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is Investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. And you can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. Just if you email me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. I know I say it all the time, but I'm really excited today. William C. Dear, the author of O.J. is Innocent and I Can Prove It. Now, Bill Dear, you can find him at billdear.com, and you can email him directly at adear, 007, AOL.com. He's got coming up the 30-year anniversary of O.J. coming up a documentary, and another documentary coming up on Discovery. Everyone's always saying to me, hey, Ed, get Bill Dear on the show. Get Bill Dear on. Okay, finally, I did. I got Bill Dear on the show. Mr. William C. Dear, are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you so much, my friend. Before we get into the whole story about O.J. is innocent and you can prove it, tell us about yourself. Who is William C. Dear?
I've been a private investigator. Started off as a policeman when I was 18 years old in Lima, Florida. Then went with the Highway Patrol and then went with the Sheriff's Office doing the Bay of Pigs invasion. And I decided at that point I got tired of eating at the back door as a deputy sheriff. And so I wanted to go a little bit higher than that. So I moved to Dallas, Texas, worked for a company for about a year, and then formed my own company. And I've been doing it now for nearly 55 years.
You were telling me you're working on right now a couple homicide investigations.
I'm doing the one that I'm doing the one that you may have seen. Remember, about 8 years ago, there was a woman bludgeoned to death in a church at about 4 o'clock in the morning by an individual who was wearing a police SWAT outfit. And it made headlines all over the world. It was in Midlothian, Texas, which is a suburb just south of downtown Dallas. But that case has been lingering for 8 years. Hadn't been solved, and I decided that I wanted to take it, so it's my nickel, and I'm going to be able to do it. We're making great headway. Police chief of that particular town released information that wasn't totally true, but now we know why. And so when you keep in consideration that this is what I do for a living, I solve homicides. I did the Kennedy assassination. I was standing on the corner when Kennedy drove by. 18 years later, I was in charge of the exhumation of Lee Harvey Oswald. I've been inducted in the Police Officer Hall of Fame for my work on the Milo murder, which resulted in 11 arrests and 11 convictions as a private investigator. So I've been doing this a long time, and my expertise lies in that field of one of the most interesting subjects there is, and that's homicide. I know when we did in 2016 a show for Discovery, the 6 shows, it turned out that 70% of all the listeners and viewers were women. Women are very tenacious. I started an organization called Dear's Angels before Charlie's Angels because nobody would give women a chance. But I promise you, women make darn good investigators.
Yeah, that's so true, though. True crime audience is majority female. So how has your theory here about Jason? Well, you know what? How has your theory about Jason been
Well, let me just start off by telling you, number one, when it happened, we were in the office, and several people asked me, so what do you think? And I said, I don't like the sound of it. It sounds like the LAPD made a rush to judgment. So I asked one of my staff who'd been with me for, I think, 18 years, let's fly out there and see what happens. So about 2 to 3 days after it happened, we flew out, rented a room, rented a car, drove into Rockingham, and it was nothing but a circus. But then I decided that what we'd do is go over there to where the crime occurred. There wasn't anybody there, and it was right on the corner of Bundy and Dorothy. When you realize that, hey, a lot of traffic there at all times. But to me, what I knew then and what I'd been seeing on television wasn't what I was watching at this point. So I put Chris Stewart on the corner, and I said, look, if I get arrested, call my attorney and bail me out. So I walked off of Bundy, down Dorothy, turned right in the alleyway, walked up to the back of where Nicole's residence was. There was some big, tall plants, about 6 or 8 feet tall, blocking the entrance from the back. I moved it, climbed over the back gate, walked that walkway, and ended up being at the front door after quite some time as far as a walk, and realizing that the killer had to come in from the back, had to walk the same walkway that I was walking. And when he got to the front door, then the picture window was to the right, and I knew that Nicole Brown Simpson had to have known exactly who it was. And then I thought, okay, If she knew who it was, why did she open the door to a stranger? Well, I knew then at that point it was no stranger. So now, 30 years later, I'm able to put it all together. I will tell your listeners this. There's no doubt in my mind that O.J. Simpson was at the crime scene on Dorothy and Bundy. But it was after the murders. And I can tell you that I also have an eyewitness, a private investigator such as yourself, who was on a surveillance in the alleyway across from Dorothy, who watched a vehicle pull in, a Bronco. It turned to the right off of Bundy onto Dorothy. When it did, it turned off its lights. It then made a slight turn to the right and entered the alley. The detective or investigator could see the two people in the car, and he pulled up a pair of binoculars and recognized that the driver was O.J. Simpson. They pulled up behind Nicole's bungalow and stayed there, engine running, lights off for approximately 10 minutes. He opens the door, referring to O.J., out of the driver's side, comes around the back, and begins to put on a pair of gloves. The passenger then climbs from the right side over the console, now behind the steering wheel of the Bronco is still running, while O.J. puts on the gloves and enters from the rear. And about 10 minutes later, O.J. comes back out. This time he's not wearing his clothes. He's wearing only a pair of boxer shorts. In his right hand, he had nothing, but in the left hand, he had a bundle. It was the bundle of clothes that he had apparently been wearing when he entered the complex of Nicole's residence. He opened the door with his right hand, slid inside, and as a result of that, these clothes, which I'm sure were bloody at the time, had some blood that was left onto the console. Marshall Clark, the next day or so, claimed the Bronco was full of blood. I promise you and your listeners, it was not full of blood. There was enough blood in that Bronco on the console to fit on my thumbnail, but no blood on the brake and no blood on the accelerator, and no one's going to tell me that you can commit a murder from a man who knows karate, and you fight with Ron Goldman and instill 27 stab wounds, and you don't have any blood on your shoes or blood on your clothes that's transferred onto the driver's seat or to the brake or to the accelerator.
Yeah,
and I'll let you ask me a question from there.
Yeah. That throws out the footprints evidence. Yeah, the PI, was he associated with Anthony Policano?
No. He was just a private. He'd been about 15, 20 years in the business. The reason he didn't come forward right away is that he thought it was a drug thing going bad. But as a result of that, and he wasn't paid to leave that assignment, he was on another assignment. So he waited a number of years, and then finally when it came out that I was involved, he calls me and we sit down and talk. Since that time, we've given him 2 polygraph tests by the best in the country, and he's passed them both as to his validity and the fact that he knows what he's talking about. Now, with all that in mind, you've got to keep in this consideration that if O.J. was at the crime scene, but after it happened, who was the one in the passenger seat? Well, it turns out that the passenger was Jason Lamar Simpson's, O.J.'s oldest son. Well, it never came out during the early part of the investigation that his son, who was 25, 5'11", 235, on probation, by the way, for assaulting his previous employer with a knife. Now, that should have been a red flag immediately to the police department. It's 101. But they didn't do that. They made a rush to judgment, and they arrested O.J. thinking O.J. did it, which I promise you he did not do it, but he's protecting his son and has been for many, many years. As you know, O.J. passed away a week or so ago. I was going to be meeting with him, but I did not realize with the prostate cancer that he had, it was that serious. And I knew that if it did become serious, I might have the great opportunity to sit down and talk with him. And if I did, I was hoping, beyond hope, that at that time he would admit his participation in it. And because I really feel sorry for him. The man suffered more than what anybody realizes. O.J. protected the one person that he felt he was obligated to do, and that was Jason. He'd had trouble with Jason when he was playing football at the age of 10. Sports Illustrated has an article dated back that length of time showing that O.J. had been interviewed and said, I'm going to have to stay home and take care of my son because he is a troubled child and we can't control him. Well, the son continued with that problem for many, many years. Had a drug alcohol problem, abuse of drugs, had been in the psychiatric unit, He had attempted 3 attempted suicides, was known to carry a knife, and on the particular night of the murders, Nicole was going to be supposedly having dinner at a restaurant where normally he would be the chef, but only the sous chef. The regular chef who owned the restaurant took off that Sunday. As a result, Jason then became the acting chef and was preparing dinner for 13. But Nicole never showed up. You don't do that to somebody who suffers rage disorder, who's on medication-controlled intermittent rage disorder, who had checked into Cedars-Sinai just 6 weeks prior to that and told the attending physician, I'm out of my medication and I'm about to rage. And that right there, if the police department had done their job in the first place, this thing would not have lasted 30 years. I've been involved in it 30 years only because of the fact I did my best to see if O.J. would come forward, but he didn't. But I can tell you now, even though he's passed away, I have every intention of taking all the evidence I have, and I promise you I have a great deal of evidence, and I'm going to take it before the grand jury, and hopefully we'll get an indictment. And I want the reputation that O.J. had back. That's the same thing that after he was found not guilty, he ended up in Las Vegas. And what happened there? He ends up getting arrested for an armed robbery, which was so phony. And I say that as a person who's been in this business for years. 4 judges and I sat down. We knew that he was being played at this particular time. He was at a wedding. He got a call from this individual who had set up this meeting with 2 memorabilia dealers and called O.J. and told him, said, O.J., they're trying to sell your memorabilia. He said, I don't give a damn. I'm not going to come over there. The man called him back. We know who he is, 4-time convicted felon. He's well known in the industry. So he had placed recording devices on top of this small room that contained 1 bed, but it had a good recording system and recorded the entire conversation. He calls O.J. and said, O.J., now they're selling your mother's stuff. Well, that's one thing that set him off. So then he asked 2 or 3 friends, if you want to go with me, I'm going over to get my stuff back. And that's exactly what he did. When he entered Las Vegas, you see him walking the hallway. He enters the small room down. There was a cheap room of that particular hotel. Opens the door, and all the memorabilia was on that single bed. The 2 memorabilia dealers had been from L.A., and this guy had brought them over with the understanding he was going to buy all this stuff. O.J. gathered the stuff up, and they admitted later it was his stuff, but yet 90% of it was. And so he gathered it, and the people that were with him left. They didn't pull a gun. One of the guys had a permit for a gun, and that's a crock that if anybody says that O.J. pulled a gun, that's a bunch of nonsense. They left. O.J. called the police department in Las Vegas and said, look, I picked up my stuff. I have it. There's a few things that aren't mine. If you want to come get it, fine. If not, you want to tell them to come get it, I'll be glad to give it back. But instead, it was a setup. And the next thing you know, poor O.J. gets arrested again, and this time for a so-called armed robbery. And next spends 9 years in prison for something that son of a gun didn't do.
Yeah, I was in Vegas for that, and some of his co-defendants, like you said, they were armed, and they even had better defenses than O.J. did. They all got better dispositions in their cases, every single one of them. That's a whole nother story, a whole nother show for us, my friend. Back to the PI though, real quick. So you have a sworn statement from him. You have like a video deposition from him. What do you have?
I have both. I have both video and I have it written. But you're talking about the investigator.
Yeah, the witness, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we have him on tape, on film. I will share this with you.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, I did a short film, and it aired in Santa Monica. And it was my short investigation on the case and bringing it current. And when it was a full house at the theater, so when it came out, there was a lady waiting who had been sitting in the back of the theater, came out and told my assistant, he said, she wants to talk to you. And I said, okay. So when I got through with several other people, we spoke. We took pictures of her. We can prove everything we said. And she said, quote, Mr. Dear, I promise you, my brother was Robert Kardashian, whom you know. I was his sister. Before he died, he made me promise that if I ever saw you and make every attempt to do so, tell you that you got it right. O.J. did not commit the murders. Jason did. Now, you can't get it better than that.
Now you've been in the public eye on this case for 30 years. Have you ever talked to Jason or O.J.?
There was a meeting set up for me to visit with O.J., but I felt because this was my investigation, I did not want to have anybody involved. Nobody paid me. It was my money. I've done very well in this business. I work some of the top murder and kidnappings around the world, and then I do cases sometimes for $10 for children that have been kidnapped. In this particular case, it was my nickel from the very beginning, and even though I've written 2 books on it, books do not make you money.
Yes,
and if anybody thinks that to the contrary, I can promise you it doesn't fly. And you're certainly not going to live by it, that's for sure.
Yeah, maybe back in the 70s. Definitely
maybe.
You know? Okay. Now what about Jason? Have you heard through the grapevine of any reaction or any kind of response?
When we were originally there, he decided he wanted to up and leave, and he moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And I know we followed him. We knew places he's been. But before he left, he lived in the kind of off the ocean side, and he lived in the back of a kind of a duplex sort of thing. And he lived there with his dog and in a single bed, kind of a very small complex. And as a result of that, he would play with this dog. And we have photographs of him wearing the knit cap that was found at the crime scene. In it was the hairs of a Negro boy, a man, and in addition to that was a dog. By the way, we have the dog's ashes. We have things that Jason had thrown into his garbage. We have one that says, "It's the year of the knife for me. I cut away my problems with a knife. I don't let anybody bother my family." Then when he failed to pay for a public storage facility that he'd put a box in that contained some important items, I was able to acquire it since he failed to make the payment. Acquired it from an individual who was sent there to buy it. We paid for it. We own it. We have it inside this box, which wasn't very big, in this large storage facility that was being operated by A.C. Callings. It contained the following: a box with his dog's ashes, the jacket that he wore when he spoke on behalf of O.J. after O.J. was found not guilty. And in addition to that, we found 3 diaries that included things that you would not believe concerning the murders. In addition to that, at the bottom of the box was a knife, a Gerber replica of a Mark V designed for one purpose. That's one purpose: to cut and to kill. And that knife was at the bottom of the box. When we pulled it out, it was a boot knife that Jason had carried in his boot or on his belt behind his back, slight marking on the leather sheath showing the initials JS. In addition to that, we had numerous photographs. It gave us everything that we needed, in my opinion, and those of close friends, that this was the murder weapon. We even had 3 of the top medical examiners who examined the boot knife. The boot knife had the top removed. Wax had been poured inside. And when we compared the wound that Nicole sustained at her residence, it matched perfectly with the hilt of the knife.
I wish the average person could understand the amount of time and effort that money and expense.
I can't tell you how much money I've spent on this.
Yeah, this is crazy.
But I intend to finish it. I don't, just because O.J. passed away, I'm sorry, but I don't intend to leave this thing standing here. I intend to go after the Sun Continuum, which I've been able to do. And now we've got some big breaks. We had a guy told us that Jason had attacked him and nearly beat him to death in a fit of rage when he got fired. We know another woman who he cut up all her hair. We know another woman who he threw in a bathtub that had no water in it. We have another woman who he bashed out the pastor's window and pulled her out through the window and began beating her before his friends stopped him. He never interviewed this individual, and yet he checked into Cedars-Sinai Hospital emergency room and said, "I'm about to rage." Never been interviewed by LAPD. Lieutenant Pietroni has sent me an email stating our department never interviewed Jason Lamar Simpson. He was represented by an attorney, Carl Jones, who's a man of color, who's now deceased, who represented only people who were involved in major cases such as homicide. We have all that information. We know that O.J. hired this attorney to represent Jason 2 days after the murders. Why in the world, if Jason was on probation at the time for assault with a deadly weapon, a knife, why would the LAPD have picked him up for questioning whether or not he was represented by an attorney or not? As people see on television and all these true crimes, you can bring somebody in for questioning. They can take the fifth. They can be represented by a lawyer, but you can certainly have them on film and see what their reaction was. But Van Etter and Lang never did. The same with the socks found at the foot of the bed. The truth of the socks were not there originally, but after Van Etter and they obtained a search warrant, they went inside, and there the socks, supposedly having blood on them from O.J. and Nicole, except for the fact that one of the top former FBI people, Mr. Frederick Reeder, had checked the socks and said that the blood was on the sock, but the blood went from side to side on the sock, which means there was no foot in it. He also admitted to me that the blood came from a vial of blood. We know that when O.J. was taken down, Thana Pritis, registered nurse of 37 years, drew 8 cc's of blood in a vial that contained EDTA. He shook it. Lang and Van Etter asked for it. It was given to Van Etter. Normally, that's not protocol. Van Etter put it in his left pocket. Later that afternoon, he turned it back over to Dennis Fung, but that time it only had 6.5. Yes, the socks contained EDTA, and everybody should know that laundry detergent contains EDTA, but not to the degree that the blood was that was found on those socks.
Yeah, I had FBI whistleblower Dr. Fred Whitehurst on the show, and he was ready to testify. He was there, ready to testify, but they didn't need him. Let me slow you down a bit. We're talking to private investigator William C. Dear. His book is O.J. is Innocent, and I Can Prove It. You can find him at billdear.com, and you can email him at adear007@AOL.com. You mentioned a couple of things. First of all, to back up a little bit, you mentioned something about A.C. Callens was in charge of the storage unit?
Public storage, that particular unit facility at that point, when Jason placed those items that we know came after the murders into the storage facility, A.C. Callens was, in fact, and by the way, I happen to like A.C. Callens, was the manager of the facility.
Really?
If you will go on to where public storage makes a lot of money out in L.A. and across the country, as people know. When you don't pay the rent, they put it up for sale. In this particular case, they have to publicly identify who the person is and the facility and when it's coming up. We located to our investigators the ad, which was one of many, and you had to really kind of take a magnifying glass to look at it, and it was Jason Simpson. So we know which storage facility. We know what was, being sold, and it was sold as is, lifting the lid, just the box. Nobody realized because you couldn't look in the box. So it was purchased sight unseen, but I'd been warned that vital information would be contained in that particular box, and certainly it was.
You have sources inside, I guess, the family and friends of these people.
Yeah, I've been tipped that he had put something in the public storage but failed to pay it. And so we checked in when we found the ad. We knew we were right, and we verified the information.
Okay.
So it's all, everything that, people, I get emails from people who irate that I believe O.J.'s innocent.
Yeah.
I've never met him, never been paid by him, don't know him that well as a personal friend. I know he's done some stupid things after the murders. There's no doubt about it. But I will tell you this, as God is my witness, the man died innocent of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman.
Now, you mentioned that he had hired an attorney, Mr. Jones, I believe it was, for
Carl Jones.
Carl
right.
Jones. But O.J., he had Howard Weitzman, who allowed him to be interrogated without an attorney or questioned without an attorney.
He knew he was innocent. He knew he didn't have to worry about it.
O.J. did. Weitzman did.
Weitzman had been told by O.J., I didn't do it. And he was assured by O.J. Keep in mind, Why would you get in the car with two detectives when your attorney told you not to? You go down to the jail. Attorney's not even at the jail when Thanopoulos checks him, and they actually filmed him from his toes to his nose, front and back, and the only laceration he had was to the left, one of the fingers on his left hand, and that's when they drew the blood. I mean, the guy, O.J., he may not have been the smartest person in the world, but he's certainly smart enough to know, don't talk if you were actually involved in committing the murder. Now I'm going to tell you something else that no one knows. O.J. took, during the time of the charges, a polygraph test by a number one examiner in the country, and he failed it totally. Okay, you say, well, that proves he's guilty. No, it doesn't. If he went to the crime scene because his son called him, his son gets in the car, they drive over, O.J. gets out, O.J. goes in to see whether or not his son is telling him the truth or he's having psychological problems when he doesn't remember things. When you go through all that, then when he failed the test, it's because he had knowledge. He knew. He was there at the scene afterwards. He could not have passed a polygraph test under any circumstance. And I dare any examiner to contradict what I've said, because I got three of the top in the country who will certainly testify.
Yeah, also the guilt of being there running around in the blood. And like you said, too, how could you be running around that blood and not have any blood on the brake?
Can you believe it? No blood on the brake. And that Marsha Clark, now that's a woman you need to interview. If you ever get her mad, I promise you talk about language. I guarantee you she can give you a mouthful of language that you don't want to hear.
My sister actually went to high school with her.
Oh, then she knows.
It's a small world. It's a very small world, you know.
I rode on an airplane with her after the murders, and she didn't know it. And I was sitting in front, and I listened to her and her boyfriend in the back. And, well, very interesting. So she knows who I am. I've confronted her before to ask her questions at seminars where she refuses, and they make sure I don't get the questions asked because I know the answers.
Now, what was the reason that O.J. and Jason drove over there?
Because he didn't. His son been in a psychiatric unit, and a lot of times on his medical records, I have the medical records, I have the psychiatric analysis too. When he does that, sometimes he does not remember what he really did, and because of the fact on the night of the recital, O.J. had gone to the recital but was not invited to go eat with Nicole and the family who was going to be eating at Messaluna restaurant. And she was going to have her entire family there, about 13. Jason was preparing a meal for 13 people, expecting Nicole to be there, not at Messaluna, but at Jackson's restaurant at 8908 Beverly Boulevard in Beverly Hills. And instead of showing up, never calling, you don't do that to somebody who suffers intermittent rage disorder, who suffers from alcoholism, who suffers from drug abuse, who's been in a psychiatric unit, who's failed to take his medication, and all of a sudden you leave him. And there he stands waiting, his face in his hands and totally embarrassed of all the people there at work. Now, you also know that, or probably have heard, that the owner of the restaurant gave Jason an airtight alibi that Jason was cooking in front of 200 people that night. That is a total untruth. There were 33 people there that night. Jason left early with his girlfriend, Jennifer Green. The owner of the restaurant was not there. He was at his home with his mother and father preparing a barbecue dinner out in the backyard with about 30, 40 other people, and there's no way whatsoever they could have given him an airtight alibi. And the guy has now rescinded the alibi because he said, I thought I was helping Jason. Well, he wasn't helping him, except for the fact that the police never interviewed him. The same as the civil attorney said when he was taking his deposition. His partner looked over and said, if Jason didn't have an airtight alibi, I would have considered him the major suspect. Well, guess what? Jason Lamar Simpson did not have an airtight alibi on the night of the murders.
So let me see if I'm clear. So Jason went there, did the murders, and I suppose if he would have seen Ron Goldman...
Well, he confronted her. He didn't go there with intentions to kill her. Right. What he did was he was mad, furious because she had embarrassed him, and even in his psychiatric, he doesn't like women to lie to him. So he went over there to confront her. She was expecting Ron Goldman. He comes in the back gate, which he had access to, They'd gone out dancing, gone to restaurants together. So he comes up front, knocks on the door. She sees at the window. She opens the door, steps out, and then they get into a confrontation. In all probability, she slaps him, which is what she's known to do. That sets him off. He reaches for his knife, and about that time, Ron Goldman is coming in from the back. Here's the altercation occurring. Hollers, hey, 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 runs up. Ron Goldman did not have a knife to protect himself, but he knew karate, and that's when the fight ensued. But before that time, Jason had taken the knife and come down with it, with the butt of the knife on top of Nicole's skull, rendering her unconscious. Not a serious wound, but one that needed stitches and one that she'd been sore for a long period of time. He then fought with Goldman. 27 stab wounds later, Goldman's dead. Nicole's coming to. He puts his foot on her back, pulls her head back, and cuts her 3 times. I have all the film, I promise you, that was not shared in the courtroom, at my lab, on my ranch, along with Jason's vehicle, his diaries, and the murder weapon.
And so then he went back to OJ's and said, hey, I just did something crazy, and OJ didn't believe him.
He called OJ on the phone. OJ didn't believe him. He had a meeting at the intersection of San Vicente and Bundy, parked his vehicle, Jason's, got in with OJ. That's when OJ drove through, down Bundy toward Dorothy, turned right, and that's when they turned the headlights on, and the investigator sees him to the left and verifies that it was OJ driving and Jason was riding in the passenger seat. Once OJ came out with the clothes rolled up is because of the fact when he went in there, he checked Nicole's body. It was dark, and the head moved one way and the body the other because it was nearly decapitated. He dropped one of the 2 gloves that he'd taken off to check her pulse. He then realized what had happened. He knew that the 2 kids were upstairs, supposedly asleep. He knew also that she was supposed to have, one of the girls, Sydney, was supposed to have a sleepover. He didn't know that the sleepover had been canceled. So he certainly would not have committed a murder with 3 of his 3 kids up there upstairs at the time of the murders when they'd be playing and not sleeping. So it all points and makes sense. It's just that LAPD and those involved, and I promise you involved, have withheld stuff that should never have been withheld. Van Etter's deceased now. Sorry about that. Tom Lang is a good guy as far as I know, but I can assure you that all I have is facts. And you know, it's just like somebody said to me the other day, well, why doesn't Jason sue you in 30 years? Well, I can tell you why. Exactly. Because in a civil lawsuit, I have the right to take that boy's man's deposition. And I promise you the questions that I would ask, I have the answers for, and he certainly does not want that to be made a part of records.
Okay, a couple of things. The medical examiner at the preliminary hearing testified that there were 2 knives.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I have the knife that committed the murder. One is a double-bladed knife. It could have been, I said, one knife. Could have been a double-bladed knife, 2 knives. It was a double-bladed knife, and that's what we found in the bottom of the box.
I'm just going by memory from my interviews with T.H. Johnson, that the Emmy, and I saw the video in his movie, that the Emmy said that there was one knife was a double-sided and the other one was just one-sided.
They're full of hot air.
You don't think so?
It was one knife, one person perpetrator, and a double-bladed knife that had been cut or sharpened on both sides at different types, which might give you the indication that there were 2 knives. I don't think they ever said there were 2 knives. They said the possibility of 2 knives or a knife that was a double-bladed knife, razor sharp on both sides.
Yeah, that actual video is in the film Serpents Rising. If anybody
I don't care what's in that video. I know.
I'm talking to the audience. I'm trying to.
Oh, okay.
The audience too, Bill. We're talking to private investigator William C. Dear. The book is O.J. is Innocent, and I Can Prove It. You can find him at BillDear.com. Now, what about any injuries to Jason the next day? Did he must have, if he did all the fighting, he must have been covered too, right?
Well, again, being the sous chef, he preps meat. So he went back with his vehicle, the Jeep that we have now in our possession, took off the bloody clothes, put him in the hamper, and the laundry comes on Monday. Now he's been given an airtight alibi by Alan Ladd Jackson, the guy who owns. But again, here's the kicker. There was a silent partner in Jackson's. That partner furnished to me the time card for the night in question. And the time card had been altered. I have that time card.
You have the original.
I have a copy of the original.
Copy.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. So now, if you got all this, man, are you talking to the prosecutor's office and the DA's office?
They don't listen. They're not going to be made. They already have been made a fool of. They've spent millions and millions of dollars. They don't want to. They hope that I'll pass away. Mm-hmm. Guess what? I'm not going to anytime soon. They hope I'll go away, but I'm not going away. I'm kind of like their thorn in their side. The truth is the truth, and I want justice. And the wrong man was tried in that courtroom. The right man is still walking free, and in fact should be tried. And let the jury decide his innocence or guilt based on the evidence.
Now, Furman, you believe Furman planted that glove?
No, absolutely not.
Really?
No. That glove came from O.J. when he came in the back way. Took one of the gloves off, and when he was shocked, he dropped it. Now, when he came back, he still had the one glove. So he climbs over the back gate where the bungalow are, where Cato Kalin and his Arnell resided. And when he jumped over that gate, they claimed it was a 6-foot fence. It wasn't. It was a 4-foot with prongs. That's how he cut his hand. When he climbed and jumped over real quick because Alan Parks is waiting for him up front and waiting to take him to the airport, he lost his balance and hit the back of the bungalow, which is what Cato Kalin heard when he was on the telephone. Cato then went around out back, and because it's dark, you wouldn't have seen the glove. The glove was there, lying there, so when they searched the premises later, they found the bloody glove.
Isn't the timing, though, of Furman's of the picture of Furman pointing to the glove, isn't the timing of that off? Like he claimed he had not been there yet. This is obscure stuff. I know.
I don't know. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm lost on what you said on that. But there's no doubt that O.J. climbed over that fence, cut his knee, dropped the glove, made his way because you got to remember, Alan Parks is waiting to take him to the airport. And so all this that I'm giving your audience is fact. It's not hearsay. It's not what I've made up for no reason whatsoever. It's totally fact. Now, you can ask me any other questions that you think your audience might.
The knife you have in your possession, what kind of testing has been done to that knife? And who did it?
Who tested it, and they also turned it into 3 medical examiners who said in all probability, and we have them on film, this is the knife used in the murders of Nicole and Goldman.
What do you make of all these stories you hear about Joey Ippolito and the organized crime, and drug dealing, all that kind of stuff? What do you make of that stuff?
I don't know. Have they ever found Joey Ippolito?
I don't know.
Supposedly he disappeared. So they said that he was a knee breaker. Yeah. I mean, A.C. Callings was a knee breaker for Joey Ippolito, which to your audience means you go out and collect money that's owed to them. He disappeared. I don't know for sure. You can probably hit your computer and find out if he's ever surfaced or not.
So let's think here.
Huh?
I said, let's think. What about all this stuff that just recently came out? All this stuff about Charlie,
that's the biggest farce in the world. That guy tried to sell me that story for the last 10 years.
Wait, who came to you with that story? A guy named
the guy that wrote the damn thing. Excuse me, the guy that wrote the thing.
Yeah.
And they wanted me on a show the other day. Him and what's a friend, who used to be a friend of OJ's, who did a lot of interview tapes with with OJ. And I refuse to do so. I don't intend to. I don't buy the story. I've checked it thoroughly. I have no credibility whatsoever.
It seems to be like a strange little red herring, like thrown into the mix, right?
Well, it's somebody trying to sell something. I was first offered the thing. I think they offered it to me for $50,000. Then over the period of time, they lowered to $5,000, or then we do a joint venture. I thought it was ridiculous. I still think it's ridiculous and don't care if the person knows.
So what's Jason doing these days?
He's back and moved from St. Cecilia restaurant in Atlanta. He's now back at his original restaurant in L.A. He's now married, has no children. He is still a sous chef and sometimes a chef.
And what would be his relationship with his brothers and sisters right now if he killed their mother?
Very little, I would imagine. You didn't see Jason being appointed as one of the executors. You saw Justin being appointed. Justin was a very successful real estate agent in Florida, moved back up to Las Vegas to be with his dad while he was ill.
And what about on O.J.'s deathbed? Did Jason come down there?
I've been told he did, and then I've been told he didn't. I will find out pretty soon. I don't know.
And you hear these stories about O.J. had everybody sign NDAs, had them leave the phones out. What do you make of all that?
What do they know? I mean, do they know what I know? Absolutely not. They were young kids.
No, I know that, but O.J. must have known something. You think he made a deathbed?
Well, certainly he did. He could have said, "Look, I didn't do it, and I've said it all along, and I'm saying it again on my deathbed." But I don't know. I wasn't present. I do know he lived in a gated community. I know he played golf all the time. I know he had a lot of people that came to visit with him in Las Vegas. And so he lived out his life, sadly, after suffering 9 years in prison. Again, innocent on this one as well as the murders of Nicole. There's a lot of other things I could share with you, but right now I've kept some of these things close to my chest, and we want to keep it that way. For right now, anyway.
You can whisper it to me.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people bring out. I received 2 calls last week from people who have this great theory. It is so. I can only tell you, I don't know what their goal is other than 15 minutes of fame. They're certainly not going to get it from me.
What about Jeffrey Fieldings guarding the juice? The prison guard. What do you make of that?
Oh, I'm not going to even go there. Really? I promise you I don't. Okay. Yeah, no. I wish no, I just rather not. Do I think he plays any important part? Not particularly, no. I remember when, and you do if you were in Vegas, that he bonded and had to be rebonded. So people hear a lot of stuff and hear a lot of things. There are certain people who do know, and I know their names. And again, both of the ones that I know are elderly, but I have talked to them, and I have that. Just like I promised that individual, Ms. Kardashian, I would not use her information. I did not use it in 2016 when we did a 6-part series. I gave her my word, but she passed away 2 years ago, and now that information is free for me to use.
And who's that?
The lady who told me that her brother told her that O.J. did not commit the murder and that his son Jason did, and that I was certainly right in the book that I wrote.
And what about Bill Waz? That whole story about Bill Waz, he was hired to follow around. What do you think of that one?
Oh God! Another one of those 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah. Okay.
Have no comment. We could go on this for about 3 hours and still keep talking.
2 minutes left. We can't go 3 hours. I don't have a 3-hour show anymore. Okay, got a 1-hour show now, 51 minutes. And we only got about 5 minutes left. Well, what would you like to leave with us in the last 5 minutes?
I think I really pretty well covered it. Do I believe that O.J.'s innocent? You bet I do. Do I feel I have the sufficient evidence to cover that, making those kind of statements? I certainly do. Do I think the LAPD will do anything about it? No. It's the same way that I had contacted the district attorney's office and asked if our experts could examine the glove and a knit cap, and I have the documentation. They wrote me back, we can't find it. We don't know where it's at, but when we find it, we will certainly make arrangements for your experts to look at it. Well, guess what? In Las Vegas, Nevada, shortly after that, the LAPD had a homicide convention where they showed Sirhan's jacket and that of Robert Kennedy. And guess what? In a case, a plexiglass case, was the knit cap and the glove. Yet, according to the billboard, and in Las Vegas at the hotel, This was the authentic one furnished by LAPD. We interviewed the officer on duty who said he was there from LAPD to guard it and that it was being presented by the Homicide Division of LAPD. So when we contacted the district attorney again, said, hey, guess what, people? You couldn't find it. We did find it. Can we now examine it? Never heard from them since.
Well, let me ask you a question, because you have this witness, you have this box with the hat and the knife. Describe to me the exact efforts you've taken to present this evidence to the district attorney's office.
Well, we've offered to them, told them what we had, received back from LA.
In person?
I beg pardon?
How have you done it? You've sent them a letter?
Well, yeah, we've done it both in person and had an attorney do it, plus we've done it by email, and I have all the documentation. The documentation, and LAPD's public relations officer sent us an email, which we have. O.J. committed the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson. The jury found him not guilty. We say he's guilty, case closed. You don't close a case of homicide until the case is closed. There are no statute of limitations, no matter what people think, on murder.
And what about, you mentioned this private investigator that was there as a first-hand eyewitness. He didn't want to come forward. But we do know that somehow Pelicano was involved in all this, because they even mentioned they mentioned the sidebars in court.
I don't care what it said. He wasn't involved. He's had his own problems, as you well know.
Sure.
You know, I think his truth and veracity certainly has been up for question.
I would agree with that. Okay. When you're finding out it's C4 and it's safe, I think there's a problem, right? Okay.
All
right.
I think that speaks for itself.
Yeah, I hear
you. Whatever.
So don't get upset with me, Bill. So what do we?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that. And you're interviewing me, and I get upset when I find that there's certain people who think that they know things they don't know and want people to think they do know it.
Gotcha.
So that's a play on words, but anyway. I've been doing this too long.
I know. How old are you?
I'm not telling. No, I'm kidding. You want to know?
Yeah.
Let's guess at it. I've been doing this for nearly 60 years. So how old are you? Yeah, I did the Bay of Pigs invasion, so I can promise you that, and I did the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
And that's a good story in itself, too. So
I'd like to have you come back and talk about that. But let me ask you this. So then 30 years ago, how old were you when you're hopping
Well,
over
I can tell you how old I am now, okay? I'm 86 years old.
86? That's not so bad. So then you would have...
No. I plan on being around a lot longer.
So then you were 56 when you were hopping over that wall, right?
86 years old, and I was 56 when I climbed over that gate and walked that walkway. And we'll never forget it as I sat there looking at the blood all over the sidewalk. And the fence where Ron Goldman was laying on his back, and then seeing the blood and seeing the strike marks of where her head was pulled back and her throat was cut. I have my own crime lab at my ranch in a place called Mount Calm, Texas, just south of downtown Dallas and just a little bit north of Waco. But we have vaults that we keep all the items in all the murder cases that I've been involved in over the period of years. And so we can research anytime we want. We probably have in those two big giant bank vaults 50 or probably more than that, like 70 or 80 file boxes full of records.
So then how many death penalty cases, homicide cases have you testified at?
I don't represent criminals. I've never represented criminals. Don't intend to represent criminals. I started out in this business believing in truth and justice. And as a result, the only time I've ever worked on a criminal case is when I was court assigned, and I informed them then that to tell the attorney I'm going to tell it just the way it is, and that's the way it was, and that's the only one I've worked and won't work any others.
Let me ask you this, William C. Dear, are there any questions you think I haven't asked you that you want the audience to know?
Not particularly. I think you did a good job of what you asked.
You don't like some of my questions, I could tell. Okay, but Bill, I said you don't like some of my questions, I could tell.
Oh no, I did. I'll be honest with you. I may have that sounding hostility in my voice, but that's not true. You're the messenger, not the individual that committed or was involved. You're just giving a show.
I hear you, man. I walk into a place, I got that angry face. I says, look, I'm really not that angry.
No, I'm not angry. I've confronted and stood in front of killers before. Yeah. When we arrested those 11 people up in Akron, Ohio, we got 11 arrests. I still hold the U.S. record for the largest number of people ever arrested in conviction history of the United States. I've been inducted in the Hall of Fame, not as a police officer, but as a private investigator. So I'm in the Hall of Fame. I mean, come on. Could I have made a lot of money defending people? You bet. Yeah. I didn't do that then, and I never intend to do that now. The day I do that, I'll hang it up.
Only got a couple of minutes left. What can we find in this 30-year anniversary of the O.J. case we're going to see in October?
Probably similar to what you've heard today, and maybe a little bit more, and a few surprises on top of that. And right now, like I said, I'm working on this murder case in Midlothian, Texas, that made headlines all over the world, and I'm hoping to bring that to fruition. It's been hiding there for 8 years. And so as a result of that, I decided let's solve this case. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.
And with the death of O.J., do you think maybe the inner circle around O.J. must be aware of Jason? Do you think it would be more likely now that someone would come forward with some insight?
No, I don't think so. I think when O.J. probably made them promise never to say anything. And I wouldn't doubt that. He never said it on his deathbed. He didn't say it in the 30 years. I will tell you this, when he was in the 9 years that he served in prison, then they brought him to Vegas during a hearing. If you'll look on the records, you'll see that I was honored in a way to sit behind him.
Oh, really?
During that hearing, you'll see O.J. there, and you'll see me sitting right. First day, I was sitting off to the side. The second day, they made it available so I could sit behind him. He knew I was there. I can't tell you how he knew, but he knew I was there. And I felt sorry for him then, feel sorry for him now. He's gone to a much, much better place.
William C. Dear, the book is called O.J. is Innocent, and I Can Prove It. You can get the Kindle version, still available. If you want to get a hard copy, it's like a collector's item. You can find them at billdear.com. And if you want to email him, it's adear007@aol.com. Mr. Dear, thank you so much.
My pleasure, and good luck to you. Continued success.
Thank you, sir. Good night.